Welcome to Conversations Live. For more than a decade, we've brought you the best in books, entertainment, and current events. When the movers and shakers of the world have something to say to you, they say it to us first. Now, here's your host, Cyrus Webb.
And welcome back, everyone, to Conversations Live. I'm your host, Cyrus Webb. Glad you all could join us once again, with you tuning in on the radio dial here in Mississippi at WYAD 94.1 FM. We welcome you all back to our show, as well as tuning in through our online affiliates around the world. We're glad to have all of you with us as well. I'm excited to welcome to our program today author John O'Brien. He's written a fascinating book that I think a lot of people, ironically, can relate to. I think we all know what it's like to have to be able to fit in, maybe sometimes feeling as though there's a certain part of us that is more comfortable around one group, while there may be other times that we feel more comfortable around others. His book is called Keeping It Halal. It's the everyday lives of Muslim American teenage boys. We'll talk to John not only about the writing of the book, but what is it that led him to be able to chronicle these stories, and really, I think, the connection that all of us can feel to it. If you're just not hearing about the book, we'll tell you at the end of our segment how you can be able to get it for yourself. But John, hello to you, and welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here.
And the pleasure is definitely all mine. And as I said, John, I think there is a connection that people will feel with this book, even though they may not be expecting it. And that is because I think we all do know what it's like for us to deal with the challenges of trying to fit in, but also be true to who we are. What was it like for you to, first of all, to be able to chronicle these boys and also to share a bit of their story?
Yeah, well, it was a great experience. I actually did this work while I was in graduate school as a sociology graduate student, and I really was interested in issues of religious identity, of Muslim identity, in large part because I myself am a Muslim convert. So I converted to Islam in 2003. I was raised as a Catholic, but I was always open to different kind of religious beliefs and systems, and so I came to convert at that time, and I really showed me I had access to a lot of Muslim people that I had never known before, and I really saw how, their lives were very similar to the lives of non-Muslims, but there's a lot of sort of divisions between those groups where people don't get to know one another. So I thought it would be an interesting study to kind of look closely at the lives of one group of Muslims, and sort of young people is who I gravitated to for the project.
Right. And I have to imagine, as I hear on this program a lot, John, that people, for one thing, they're excited to be able to tell their story, but also to know that they're not by themselves in what they were experiencing and feeling. Is that part of what you felt as well?
Definitely. I found that a lot from actually having the book come out and reading and speaking about it in different places, how many Muslim young people and even Muslim adults come up to me and say, wow, I'm really excited to see that this is happening with other people, and people say it's really moving to them, it's really meaningful to them. But I think, as you say, more to the point is a lot of non-Muslims can relate to this too, issues of fitting in, of growing up, trying to figure out who you are. And people were often surprised, even when I started the project, before I really turned it into a book manuscript, I would share some ideas and what I was finding, and people, non-Muslim friends would say, wow, that's just like, me growing up, or these seem just like normal kids. And so that's unfortunately surprising to people, how many of these things are really universal.
Yeah. I think, that is one of the interesting things. One of the individuals you introduced us to, John, is Omar. I mean, talk to us about that experience of seeing him come up to you as you describe it in the book. And then, of course, that question that is asked, to you, are you Muslim? And for you to answer yes. I think, one thing I also love about this book is that it kind of breaks down some of the stereotypes that people expect, when they hear the word Muslim or hear anything really, even when it comes to, different nationalities or different races. Was that also part of what you experienced as well?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think it was interesting from both sides. I mean, a lot of the young people I met there were surprised to meet, someone like me who was a Muslim who had converted, who was a white American Muslim. And so for many of these young people said I was one of the first people like that they had gotten to know. And likewise, I had sort of got to hang out with people that age and see what their life was like. But I think it was important to gain access to this community that I was a Muslim. There's a lot of trust that I think that helped to build. But this was also a community that was very open to non-Muslims in general, and particularly after 9/11, this mosque did a lot of work in kind of opening its doors and welcoming people of different religions in to really try to teach about, what Islam is really about and clear up so many of the misconceptions and stereotypes about the religion.
Yeah, you talk about in the book how you became a Muslim, or why you became a Muslim, John. Did you expect that you would be a part of this story that you told in the book?
I didn't really. I mean, I think only in retrospect. It reminds me of the way a lot of people talk about when they're writing a book or even writing a song or something. They don't really know in some ways what it's about until they're finished. And I think one of the things I didn't realize about this project was how much of it was really connected to my own trying to figure out sort of how to be a Muslim, and an American at the same time for myself. And I think spending time with these young people and seeing how they were sort of asking some of the same questions was really meant a lot to me and sort of made me click with them in a way that I think we sort of, in some ways, we're trying to figure out some of the same stuff together, but obviously from a different perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things that you mentioned, too, I want to say for our audience, is that he talks about being Muslim as just one of the identities. And that, again, goes back to the theme that really, for me, I've been telling people about with this book, John, is that it really is about the layers of all of us and how it, it's just like I think for anyone else. I mean, not to oversimplify it, but, as someone may be considered, a spouse or, have a sibling. I mean, that we all are, when it comes to that, we all kind of can be different things to different people. Is that one of the things that you hope readers of the book take away from this, John, that we have to be very careful not to be able to categorize people just because of their faith and also how we see them?
Completely, yeah. And what you just said is really one of the core sort of findings of sociologists who study identity is that, of course, everyone has various identities and they're balancing them, as you said, in different settings. How you are at work is different from how you are at home, is different than how you are with this group of friends versus with your family. And young people in particular are always balancing those things, from going to school to family to maybe friends in their neighborhood to different groups of friends. And religion is one of those identities. Of course, race can be one, your gender can be one, your sexuality. But I think there are certain identities which, unfortunately, in certain times and places, people think of as sort of overarching and almost overwhelming. So when you think of someone as a Muslim, people often think, oh, that has to be sort of taking over every part of their life, when in fact that's only one part of them. And so they're also, playing basketball or listening to music or going to school or, trying to have a girlfriend or all the things that young people try to do. So I think what you say is exactly right, that I really want to make this point that, even for an identity like that to an outsider sounds so all-encompassing is just one part of what people are.
Yeah, for sure. What a great lesson, what a great reminder for all of us. I want to say for those who are just tuning in, either on the radio side or online, you're listening to Conversations Live. We're talking about the new book, Keeping It Halal, The Everyday Lives of Muslim American Teenage Boys by John O'Brien. We'll remind you a little bit later how you can get the book for yourself. It is available on Kindle through our friends at Amazon.com, and I'll remind you of that. What surprised you the most about what you were able to chronicle in the book, John, when it comes to individuals that were having to deal with this daily struggle?
Yeah, well, I think it was interesting. Before I started the project, I sort of assumed that a lot of it would be about dealing with discrimination, dealing with harassment. That's obviously one part of the experience of being a Muslim in the U.S. because of stereotypes. Because what most people hear about Islam is negative things, about terrorism. They don't really learn about it in school. Unless you have friends that are Muslim, you probably know, the reality of it. But I expected that to be actually more prominent. But what I found was, and even surprised me, who was a Muslim at the time, how much what these kids were dealing with was kind of everyday teenage struggles about relationships, about, trying to be involved in popular culture that their parents might not approve of trying to, be good kids as well as succeed in school, as well as try to fit in with cool friends at school. But I think also for them, it was also having to balance that with the expectations that being Muslim carried with it. And I think this is also important to say, as you said before, that every identity carries expectations. So even being an American teenager has expectations of when you're supposed to start dating and what you're supposed to do for fun and how you're supposed to fit in, including, pressures about alcohol and drugs and involvement in sexuality. And I think those things sometimes were in tension with the expectations of what it meant for them to be good Muslims, both for their parents and for themselves. So a lot of the book really became about that, is how do they sort of navigate that and try to fit both of those sets of expectations at the same time, which could really be a challenge on a day-to-day level.
Yeah. I think the other side of it, you actually mentioned dating earlier, and I think that is one thing you actually devote a chapter to that and discussing it, because I think it is one of the things that we don't really think about so much as being a challenge. But we do still live in a world where so many people judge you, based on how you're seen, and also, of course, when people hear certain things, again, as you just mentioned, they definitely form an opinion and kind of have their own mindset about what that person is like. The chapter, though, you entitled it "Keeping It Halal and Dating White Muslim," two kinds of Muslim romantic relationships. Why was it important for you to kind of to talk about that aspect of what was dealing with these young boys, and also what is common today, John?
Yeah, so basically it's funny because the way I do this research is I spend time with them, and I would write all these notes after spending time with them about what we did and what they said, and so I had all these pages of notes, and I would go through them and look for sort of what were the most common themes that came up and that they were talking about, and relationships was without a doubt the number one most talked about issue. So this was unavoidable, and again, as a young person of that age, it's not surprising. They're adolescents, they're growing into themselves, they're hearing people at school or having girlfriends and boyfriends. And they were really trying to figure out how to solve this issue that within their community, and it's not, of course, only with Muslim communities, different kinds of religious communities, different kinds of immigrant communities have similar kind of expectations that the young people will not be involved in dating without the approval of parents or without, the intention of getting married and things like that. So for them, they really had to find a way to solve this problem, which is a very practical problem, which is that on the one hand, they know that this isn't something they're supposed to do. On the other hand, it's really very common among their peers at school, and it's all around them, of course, in popular culture and part of their hormonal instincts as well. So they sort of figured out two ways to handle it. One is, and this is something that actually happens in some Christian communities as well, to try to date in a way that was religiously appropriate. The difference is in many Christian communities in the U.S., they've sort of had enough time to almost work out ways that this can happen and be accepted by the families. But within this community, they were sort of kind of making it up as they went. So you had young people, even whose parents didn't know they were doing this, try to date in religiously appropriate ways, which meant, we're not going to kiss and hug, we're going to be with our friends, we're not going to, go off on our own. And they would call this keeping it halal because halal means permissible, sort of allowed. And so that was one route. The other route, which I call dating while Muslim, is more like you're a little bit blurring the lines. You're maybe letting some things slide. You're not being completely religiously appropriate. But even these kids would try to kind of do things in a proper way, like, for example, meet the parents of the person they wanted to spend time with and still work religion into their friendship with this person in some way. So it was really a lot of kind of trying to mix these different cultures and make it work out. And it's a challenge because these things are in tension with each other. But to me, what it really showed is they really wanted to be able to be both good Muslims and American teenagers. And that was really, at the end of the day, what they were striving for.
Did being with these young people, John, did it make you hopeful as to not only the future of relationships between individuals, regardless of how they identify themselves, but also about how the younger generation was looking at things and how their viewpoint was something that was more moving forward instead of looking backwards?
It definitely did. One thing that was, I think, for many people, surprising outcome of my book was that they didn't have so much. I mean, they did face some discrimination and harassment. And in fact, this seems to maybe have changed a bit with the campaigning and election of Donald Trump. But there was more kind of harassment happening. And this project, I should mention, happened before that campaign and election. So things may have changed in some ways. But at least at the time, their schools were very diverse and their friends were very accepting. So they would have non-Muslim friends come to the mosque and learn about Islam and be very open-minded, and so while they of course faced some discrimination, in general there was really an open-minded community there on both sides, and I think also their parents were open-minded to them meeting other kinds of kids and getting to know different kinds of people. So it really did leave me hopeful about that part of it. I think the more problem is the bigger political issues when it comes to people running for office who want to use stereotypes to try to get elected, or some of the bigger sort of issues of war or politics in the world that lead people to think of Muslims only as in this one kind of way of sort of violence and terrorism. But on the ground level, when people really get to know each other, it really does tend to turn out pretty well.
Yeah, I think that is so true. And what a great reminder for all of us. Again, everyone, John O'Brien has been our guest. Keeping It Halal is the name of his new book, The Everyday Lives of Muslim American Teenage Boys. As I mentioned earlier, it's available through our friends at Amazon.com, both in print as well as on Kindle. You guys can go ahead and one-click it over there. And, John, how can our audience stay connected with you?
So I'm a professor at NYU, New York University in Abu Dhabi. So, and I also have a website, johnobrien.com. You can find my research and books there as well.
All right. Well, John, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it, and looking forward to speaking with you again.
Thanks so much. I really appreciated it.
You're more than welcome. And we thank your audience for tuning in to another great segment of Conversations Live. Until next time, I'm your host, Cyrus Webb, saying as always, enjoy your day, enjoy your life, enjoy your world. Make sure you take out time to enjoy some good music as well as a great book. Thank you all for choosing Conversations Live today. You will make it a great one.